Welcome to our first Wellness Forum of the year. My name's Patty Siebold. I'm the president of the Boothbury Region Health and Wellness Foundation. And one of the things that we like to do for all of us on the peninsula is get ourselves educated about health-related issues and wellness-related issues. So this being tick season, I don't know about you, but I have pulled 3 or 4 ticks off my dog every day this week and the last few weeks. So we are very blessed to have as our speaker tonight Dr. Nananda Cole. And Nananda was discovered for us by our local Dr. Steve Cook, who many of you know from the St. Andrew's Emergency Room and also very involved with our Wellness Foundation. He's on our board and has been leading our patient empowerment sessions that we've been having pretty much all year and will continue again in September. So we are learning how, with his help, how to be in control of our health and to make sure we have copies of all our medical records that from all the different sources, hospitals and primary care and specialists and orthodontists and radiologists and so on, and how to organize them and have the right list of questions before we go and see a physician. So really we're learning how to partner with physicians, and that's relevant because one of the passions that Dr. Cole has is also helping patients work collaboratively with physicians. Nananda lives in Georgetown and manages and works for the FDA doing research projects. One of her current projects is on multiple sclerosis. And she's doing clinical trials and working to help with helping patients and doctors work better together and provide them tools to allow them to collaborate more effectively through sharing information, which is exactly what we're practicing and preaching. But she also is a physician and an internist, and had her own encounter with a tick last summer and went through her own experience of being a patient. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Nananda. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'd like to start by saying I had absolutely no interest in ticks, no concerns about ticks at all. It was the furthest thing on my radar screen until, what was it, last July or August? We got greatly interested in foraging for mushrooms in our woods. We were very excited by that, and we had gotten very, very good at the black trumpets and the chanterelles. Those were great. And we were novices at that, and suddenly I got sick. And I was thinking, well, maybe it was the mushrooms, maybe not. So I was a little antsy about what it was, and got very sick very quickly. In fact, I don't think I'd ever been that sick. This is my husband Bob here, who saw me through this. But I was really sick. It turned out I had Lyme disease, meningitis, so it actually got neuro-Lyme, got into my brain, and also I had anaplasmosis. I got bitten by a tick that was doubly infected. Turns out not that uncommon, and I made the diagnosis myself within a day. I saw a rash, so it was fortunate. So I actually started myself on the appropriate treatment the day before I went in to see my own doctor. So I got a real jump on it, and even with that, was really, really sick for about one to 2 weeks, very, very sick, and then was on drugs, the antibiotics, for several weeks, for a full month, and was on double dose of that, which means you cannot go out in the sunlight at all without feeling really sick. I mentioned the word really sick several times. You don't want, I mean, this is like a month out of your life.
That's the
Yeah, It is the pain when you're. I mean, it is. This is really not. It's not like having the flu. It's not. This is. You get really sick, and then even when the antibiotics kick in, there a lot of reflux. If you took the dose I was taking, if I took them as I was supposed to, two together, it would cause immediate vomiting. So I had to actually adjust my dosing very carefully around what I was eating so I could keep the medication down. So, and that being said, it's so much easier. If you think that it may be annoying to try to avoid getting bitten by a tick, piece of cake. It really is not, and I just want to view myself as I'm a cautionary tale. I kind of felt, well, I would be able, I would know that a tick were there. I would somehow be safe. I wasn't really taking any precautions. I wasn't doing what I need to. Now I do. But what I want to do with you today is really talk about, give you enough information so that you can still enjoy what you like doing, going outdoors, doing the activities you normally do, but do it smart. And there are lots of different ways you can actually prevent Lyme disease or any other tick-borne disease. Okay, so battling killer arachnids. First thing I learned was that ticks are not insects, they are arachnids. They are related to spiders. Yeah, which I fear justifies my deep fear of spiders at last. Lyme has been in the news quite intensely for the past year, not just here but throughout New England. So I'm going to start with how to get Lyme disease, a lesson in how to get it. Actually, that's our internist, you may know Dr. Woodstein there, who was out foraging for mushrooms foraging for mushrooms out in with us, and her husband Charles Duncan also foraging. This was before I got sick, but this is an excellent way to get Lyme disease. Going down in the woods, moist areas, not wearing protective clothes. This is a superb way. This is probably how I got it. Other ways to get it while you're enjoying the coast. If you spend any time outdoors, you will be exposed to ticks. The entire coast is quite heavily infested with diseased ticks. You don't see too many of these signs out there, but there are some. But the entire coast is affected. There are a few islands, I should say, that decimated the deer population. Monhegan is one where there is no Lyme disease, but other than that, deer can swim. So even the islands are not safe. Again, sitting on the grass in a moist area, high risk. Bicycling, well, falling off your bicycle. Drinking, if you like to drink outdoors in the high grass. Pointers, if you're active outdoors, or even you just like to go out and walk, and you don't take precautions, you will likely get infected, period. The last time I gave this talk, there were some of the Maine guides were present, and they mentioned that, this was again last fall, that half of the guides in the last talk they went to had already had Lyme disease. If you talk to people who work outdoors, it's there. Ticks outnumber us greatly. They are diseased. They are waiting for us. And they are much smarter than us, and I will explain why. And bottom line, they are simply icky. These are all very important. Excuse my technical language here. But on the other hand, if you take precautions, you can completely avoid you can get the risk of infection down very, very low. So why don't more people take precautions? How many of you, when you're out and about, take serious precautions?
What do you mean by serious?
Oh, yeah, what do you mean by serious? Well, I'll talk about what that means by serious. Okay, so that's not enough. That's not enough. Okay, so in my area is medical decision making, and so we think a lot about why people make the decisions that they do. And I think it has to do with this cognitive dissonance, that we don't like concepts that have a different meaning. So there's a mental stress or discomfort that people experience when they have two or more contradictory beliefs. We don't like that. right? We like clarity, we like black and white, we don't like dissonance. So we have this thing that nature is good, right? Being outdoors is healthy. We have all these positive attributes about being outdoors, which in fact are true, but we don't want to think that being outdoors, there are disease parasites lurking everywhere trying to suck our blood. Well, that's also true. Now, how do we reconcile this? Well, we just don't think about one, right? But what I want us to be at the end of the talk is for you to be able to still have the notion that nature is good, but we do have to be a little cautious in what we do. Okay. Yeah. So, I think science beautiful. So this is the latest report. Lyme disease was reported in residents of all counties in Maine in 2014. This is new. Never before has that been the case. And the coast of Maine, the entire coast of Maine, is in the high-risk zone. So those of you who live here, anywhere around this area, the coast is not safe. I mean, as far as you're not protected by being on the coast. When I'll be talking a lot about Lyme disease, but really we need to be talking about tick-borne diseases carried by ticks. Lyme disease is the most common. It's a serious disease, but it is treatable. But there are also 3 other diseases that are equally serious. One is anaplasmosis. It used to be called it's human granulocytic ehrlichiosis is the formal name. So some people have heard the name ehrlichiosis. There is another condition called ehrlichiosis that you get if you're out in Colorado, out in the West. But we have there's our own form of ehrlichiosis, which is now called anaplasmosis. And again, I had the good luck of having both of those. Babesiosis is another tick-borne disease. This one is actually, there's no treatment for it, but people do fine unless you don't have a spleen. And there's a lot of people who don't have a spleen. If you don't have a spleen and you get babesiosis, you are in you're very, very, very serious, fatal, because there's no treatment for this. There's another very scary disease out there, Powassan disease, and this is deer tick virus. It's a virus, and there's no treatment for that. It causes a fatal encephalitis, and there was a woman in the Camden area last year who had Powassan virus. And I had heard that I'm not sure this is true, that she got infected around mid-coast area, possibly Georgetown. But this Powassan disease is very scary. The fatality rate, chance of dying once you get it, is somewhere around 20 to 30%. So this is no laughing matter. And these are otherwise healthy people who are highly susceptible to this. Okay. Early symptoms of Lyme disease. There's a lot of confusion about whether people have Lyme disease because many of the early symptoms are what we call non-specific. It can resemble a viral syndrome. So you can have a headache, you can have a rash, you can have a fever. And I'll talk a little specifically about what some of the symptoms are, but there's not a single symptom that you can say, I have that, I have Lyme disease. It's a constellation of things, and so it's a clinical diagnosis, which means it has to be made upon what the symptoms are, whether you have exposure, whether you have a risk for having it by virtue of being in an area where there are ticks. Most people who have Lyme disease do not recall a tick bite. Remember I said ticks are smarter than us? When they bite you, they actually, first you can't feel them because it's the teeny tiny little ones, you don't feel them at all. And then when they bite you, they first inject a little anesthetic there so you don't feel anything. You don't feel a thing. They are very smart. And they tend to find places where you can't see them. Armpits, moist areas, belly buttons, that's where I got attacked. Places where you don't really check. So they like warm, moist places. But the good thing is, it responds to antibiotic treatment, 2 to 4 weeks of treatment, or either pills or intravenous, depending on how late you present it. If it's untreated, if you have Lyme disease and you don't treat it, it spreads beyond the skin into the blood, and most people will develop a persistent arthritis, often in the knee. And about 1 in 10 will develop neurologic symptoms, facial palsy. Some people have cardiac block. So it can cause. It starts in the skin, but it can, if you don't treat it, it can spread and cause some pretty serious symptoms. The good news is it is treatable. Okay, so here is, this is most recent, this is percent of symptoms reported among Lyme disease cases in Maine over the last 4 years. So this shows that the blue line is, EM is the classic rash that you get with Lyme disease. It looks like a little, we'll talk about that later, there's a funny little round target lesion. And according to this, about half of the people who had Lyme disease had a rash in Maine. And the arthritis, it looks like about 30% of the people who had Lyme disease had arthritis. Neurologic symptoms, this can be either a tick or meningitis, anything that basically gets into your nervous system. About 1 in 10 had that. Cardiac symptoms, very small percentage had that. Again, this is just the series in Maine. This is looking at the symptoms of all of the, it's comparing the different symptoms that you might get depending on what kind of disease you might have picked up. So this is Lyme disease. Again, for the more pluses means the more likely it is that you have that symptom. So you can see with Lyme disease, rash is more common, fatigue, muscle aches, joint aches. How many people have muscle aches, joint aches, headaches, neck stiffness? Right, how many? Right. So, yeah. It doesn't mean you have Lyme disease, but you see, this is the problem, is all of these things are, we say, non-specific. So it's sort of the constellation of them. And not everybody has all of these things. You can have some combination of them. Anaplasmosis, there's no rash with anaplasmosis. But you have muscle aches and a headache, terrible headache. Fevers and chills is prominent. Malaise or restlessness, this is that feeling that you just can't get comfortable. It's not like just feeling, oh, what do I do? It's not ennui. This is malaise. This is like really not feeling well. Nausea, babesiosis is, again, it's some stuff that, more fever and chills, but a lot of other headaches, muscle aches. Powassan, this is a rapid onset, headache, fever and chills, and nausea. So Powassan is a much more rapid development. I want to address briefly chronic Lyme disease. How many people here have heard the term chronic Lyme disease? How many people think that it's a real entity? Yeah. So it's an interesting. There's a lot of controversy out there. And I just want to sort of present the medical point of view. That there's about 1 to 13% of patients who are treated with Lyme disease have persistent fatigue, pain in their muscles or bones, and difficulty concentrating or problems with their memory over a year afterwards. Okay, so. Depending on the studies, it's 1% to 13%, and it looks like more recently it's less. Now, the problem has been that most of these people, there's no indication that they have persistent infection. So there's something that happens to a very, very small percent of people who have had Lyme disease, but it's not like there's that the bacteria that is still in you is not in you anymore. It's something has maybe happened. Some people think there might be an autoimmune response. Secondarily, some people you can get infected again. Yeah, right. You don't get immunity. No, you can go back to jail again. So some of this could be people getting it again. But in the medical literature, there's been some. Again, it's a little controversial, but the understanding, and from my review of this, is it makes sense, is that chronic Lyme disease is a misnomer. It's not a good term. And for people who have this, there is no evidence for the use of prolonged antibiotic treatment. It actually is dangerous. The prolonged use, it doesn't do any good because there's no evidence that you have persistent Lyme disease. And the best paper that I cited here in New England Journal of Medicine, they looked at most of the people who have this, and most of them had actually no evidence of ever having Lyme disease. So it may be a confusion about something's wrong, but it may be early development of MS. It may be something else going on, but it probably has in most people, not related to the Lyme disease itself. So the good side about this is if you get Lyme disease, you get treated, you get appropriate treatment, and enough of it, you take it, and that you will get better. So that's the good news with this. This is not, I mean, when I told people that when I had this, people was like, oh dear, you're going to be sick a long time. It's like, no, all better. 1 month of not feeling good at all, but you do, if you take the treatment, you complete the course, you follow the directions for taking the medicine, you should expect a complete recovery. And I was going to hope I was told to try to keep questions until the end. Was that okay? Or, yeah, okay. And I'm just going, this is some evidence about the long-term impact of Lyme disease. I think I'm just going to move on with that. I want to talk about the Lyme rash. This is the classic Lyme rash. There's only a few things that you say, if you've got this, you probably have Lyme disease. It's pointing to that. That's the only kind of specific symptom that we have for Lyme disease. And this is, let me show what it looks like. So we call it a target lesion because it looks like a target. It's red on the outside, clearing on the middle. And you often find it near the armpit, the groin, behind the knees, at the belt line, warm, moist places. Ticks like moisture. It's usually not painful, itchy, or warm. So if you got a rash and it's itchy, it's probably a spider bite or something else, but it's probably not that, because this Lyme rash does not hurt, and it expands. So during the first days, when the rash is really small, it starts out as a very, very small round thing, and initially it doesn't have that center. It's just a little round rash. Then it gets a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger, and then as it gets to a certain size, then you start to see the clearing in the middle as it gets bigger. Now, again, this is if the tick has read the textbook and knows that this is what the Lyme rash is supposed to look like. Okay? These are not educated, they're smart, but they're not educated ticks here we're talking about. So nationally, that when they've looked at how many people with Lyme disease actually had this classic rash, less than 10% of cases. Okay? So don't count, don't wait. If you think you got bitten by you were out, you think you got bitten by a tick, you have an engorged tick, and we'll talk about that, don't wait for that rash to appear, okay? Because 90% of the time, it's not there. Now, again, in Maine, this past year, it looks like about half of the people had the rash. Now, that's unusual, but nationally it's not. It's only 10%. So don't wait for that. And also, don't wait for it to get this size, because you don't see this clearing until it's pretty big. When it's small, it just looks like a little red. But it is circular, and it does grow. What I recommend people do is if you start to see a little rash you're a little worried about, you get a little black Marquee, the Sharpie pen, and just do a little trace around the perimeter of that. And that way you can tell, look at it 6 hours later, and you can see if it's expanding. Because it expands really slowly, so you're not going to be able to tell if it's an expanding rash. Because if the rash just it gets to a certain size and then it just stops, it's not a Lyme rash. Okay, and these are pretty. And I said these ticks are icky. This is icky. This is a big rash. These are and it spreads over time. So some of these are the people who've had a Lyme rash that has been there expanding for quite some time. Some more, yeah. So initially it starts at the site of the bite, but then once it gets disseminated, then it can appear somewhere else. You'll see multiple. Don't wait until this happens. Okay. And I just want to talk briefly about rashes. This talk is going to be available for people to look at, but most rashes are not Lyme rashes. Okay, most rashes, if you get bit by a spider, you get bit by whatever, lots of flies cause little rashes. There's all sorts of things can cause rashes. So the thing, most of these, if a rash is itchy, burning, it's probably not Lyme. If it's raised like a welt, it's probably not Lyme, because Lyme is sort of a flat, and again, Lyme rash tends to grow, and it grows in a circular-ish pattern. And I'm going to talk briefly about some of the other tick-borne diseases. Anaplasmosis. Transmission they're transmitted on the same tick that carries Lyme disease. Not the dog tick, it's the deer tick. There's a lot of ticks out there, but there's only one that carries all these diseases. And 10 to 50% of the deer ticks in an area are infected with Lyme disease, and about half of those ticks are infected with Lyme plus something else. Okay, so in areas where this is where you find infected ticks, it's not, if you got bit by a tick, there's a good chance that tick was diseased. Okay, so you really want to avoid getting bit by a tick. There's a little confusion as far as how long a tick has to be attached for it to infect you. When a tick is infected, the infection is in a certain part of the tick's body. So when it initially attaches, it's sucking your blood. You're not getting anything. So for the first 24 hours, you're not. If you knew when the tick was attached, you're not going to get infected in the first 24 hours. You're probably not going to get infected in the first 48 hours. It looks like it's somewhere around 3 days. That is when the tick will transmit infection for you for Lyme disease. However, again, these ticks can be infected with other bad things. For the anaplasmosis, it looks like they can be pass that infection on within somewhere between 1 to 2 days. Again, the science behind this is a little controversial. So I say that with a little bit of uncertainty. But basically, you've got 1 day pass, okay, for finding a tick. For sure, you may have up to 2 to 3 days to find a tick. So which means if you're doing a tick check on 1 day and you don't see something, you've been out, the next day, do it again, okay? If you have a tick on you, that tick is going to be getting bigger and bigger because it's sucking your blood and getting bigger and engorged. So if you miss it the first day, you still have time to find the tick and remove it, okay? So the thing is, don't just do the tick check right after you've come back. Do it for the next couple of days, okay? Because it's easier to find them as they get bigger. I think I'll skip that slide on babesiosis. Again, these are also carried on the same tick. This is a picture of the lovely woman, an artist from Camden, who was succumbed to Powassan virus. She's an artist. This is just showing what's been happening with Lyme disease. A lot of people have said, well, I've been doing this kind of stuff all my life and I've never had Lyme disease. Okay? And that's probably a very true statement because you could have been doing this stuff for a long time. Up until a few years ago, Lyme disease wasn't up here. It's called Lyme disease because it's named after Lyme, Connecticut. That's where the infection used to be. That was the hotbed of infection. It has shifted up thanks to global warming. As now we see the hotbed of infection of Lyme has come up to the northern New England, and it's creeping up the coast. So basically, you can't say whatever I've been doing is fine because before you didn't have diseased ticks out there. Now we have a lot of diseased ticks out there. So this is showing over time from 2001 to last year, 2014. This is the rate of Lyme disease, and this is the number of cases, but basically it's the same thing. Going up up, a little drop down here, going up, up, up. This was this was 2014. This is kind of, we call this an exponential growth curve, okay? This is not good. This is really scary stuff. And so, you know, these little fluctuations here, you have to remember that a lot of these diagnoses, the number, there's some variability may not be real and may have to do with reporting, the ability to healthcare provider giving the correct diagnosis. But just look at the general trend, not the short-term variations. And this is comparing what's going on in Maine. Maine is the blue line, you see going up, up, up. This is overall New England. Look, we're winning. And this is the U.S. Okay. Now, yeah. So, and before Maine was lower. So it just it's with as the climate is changing, the ticks are now able. They're surviving areas. They used to be too cold. A very cold winter will kill them off. Cold, dry winter, because they can burrow. If there's a lot of snow, will protect them. But if you have the winters that are not as cold or a lot of snow, the ticks will survive the winter, and that's what's been happening. And I just want to point out, this is Lyme disease. Over here is Lyme disease. Anaplasmosis, same trend. Babesiosis, same trend. This is just the data I have here is through last July. So, but basically, this has been a wild increase in all of the tick-borne diseases. This just shows, each dot here shows a confirmed case of Lyme disease. This is 2011. I couldn't find. Well, you see, and now then they just show you. This is what 2001 looked like. Look at the difference. You see how it's marching? See, it used to be only in southern Maine. You know, back 10, 15 years ago, you only saw cases in southern Maine, and now it's just spreading. Oops. Well, there. And that was 2011. Now it's even worse. Now it's everywhere, every county. Even in 2013, if you went into this the coldest part of the state, there were no cases up there up until last year, first time. Every county is affected. And yeah, this just basically shows the variety of counties. The counties that we're in, again, this is 2013. The darker is the worse. It means a higher rate, more people, more cases. And you can see that along the coast, we have more. We have more along this area. Okay. By county, this is an interesting one. I think mid-coast, and we love mid-coast. We have the highest. We win, mid-coast. Okay. And men, male versus female. There's a few more. The men have a little more, but I don't know that means that there's not susceptibility. It's probably just that men tend to be outdoors more. And if there's any difference between men and women behavior, men tend not to take precautions as often as they ought. So, right, Bob?
I don't know if that's been proven.
Age group. It's an interesting. All ages are affected. Let's see. Over age 65 is in orange. Look, they're pretty high. And again, more is worse, and more cases. The highest rate is the 5 to 14-year-old, and the second highest rate, awfully close, is the over 65.
We're outside too.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just because these are the groups that tend to take less precautions about it, or that they just tend to be outdoors more. I don't know.
You can't see a tick anymore.
You can't see it. Comments at the end here. Okay. And this is the incidence of anaplasmosis. Again, look at the high dense area. It's basically New England. These are not really national problems. These are problems that are really regional problems, and this region right here is the region. Okay. Okay, so, so one of the odds that a deer tick is infected, I mentioned a little bit, and there was a study in New Jersey, which is also has a big problem. They found that 55% of the deer ticks were infected with at least one disease. That's scary stuff. Maine, similar, and again, the lot are also doubly infected. Okay, what kind of tick is this?
Ugly.
Dog tick? No, that's a deer tick. Well, this is actually a stuffed animal, however.
1,000 times larger than
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so this is a deer tick, an adult deer tick, and this is the nymph. This is a male. So I show this. If you can't see it, that's the point. Okay? They're hard to see. And again, just some more pictures so you can see how small these guys are. They are rather small. Now this is an engorged tick. Okay, so the challenge is identifying. I look at these pictures again and again, and you know when you look at them here, it's like, oh, I get that. You know, that looks like my little stuffed animal. So one of these is male and a female and a nymph and a larva. But these are small. These are really small. And this is a dog tick. And this is a deer tick. Everyone says, oh, dog ticks are really big and deer ticks are really small. Well, you know, they're kind of small. You know, they're all kind of small. This is the male. This is the male deer tick, and this is the dog tick. They're kind of the same size.
Probably.
Yeah, so I don't know. You know, I basically just stay away from ticks. You know,
Go outside.
no, not that. I mean, we go out in the woods every day, almost every day. And so you can do it safely. The scary thing about the ticks, okay, so you have these are all the pictures you see. This is what they look like. By the time you find them, they probably have already engorged a bit, okay? And they no longer look like this. Now they look like this. And then how do you tell them apart? You know, so I'm supposed to be passing on some wisdom here, but my wisdom is I think it's really hard to tell these things apart. I think we all voted for a bond for the tick lab at the wherever the tick lab is, and you can actually send a tick off there free, and they will tell you what kind of tick it is. So I'd give you the way to do that. But basically, if you see a tick, get rid of it very, very carefully, unless you're absolutely positive that this is a deer, you know, a dog tick or something else. Be really careful. So this is an unfed. These are female. This is both female deer ticks. This is before and this is after. Okay. I mean, that's hard. That's hard to tell what that is. Okay, guess which one is a dog tick, which one is a deer tick?
Dogs on the right.
Dogs on the right. Yeah, because it's bigger. Yeah, you're right. But if you just saw them without the two in comparison, they look kind of. Here's some, you know, if you're real smart and you know, if you remember, this makes it a dog tick apparently. But again, I wouldn't rely upon that. Again, more tick pictures. Okay, so I want to teach you a little bit about the life of a deer tick. Because the more you can understand where they live, then you know when you have to be a little more cautious than not. So deer. They live in forests, savannas, grasslands, and shrublands. They like moist places. They like living under leaves. They really like moisture. After they attach to the host for a few days to a few weeks, engorging themselves, they drop off, and then they spend a couple of weeks to several months digesting the blood meal that they just had, and then they molt to their next stage. And then they repeat the process with a different host. So they go from different animals at different life cycles. And every time they need exactly one blood meal to go. So once they fed on one animal, so if they fed on your dog and they drop off, they're not going to feed on you. They're going to go and molt, do something. So you're not so much worried about an infected tick going from one animal to another in the short term. They don't do that. They stay until they're engorged and they drop off, and then they just molt into the next stage.
What does the next stage look like?
Well, we'll show you. So yeah. I have a couple of slides here, so hold that thought. And it's a little complicated, so it seems confusing. It's because it is. The adult ticks reproduce and they die after their blood meal. The natural reservoirs for Lyme and the other tick-borne diseases are mice, chipmunks, and other small mammals and birds. Deer are not competent hosts for the disease. But they are important in sustaining the actual the ticks themselves. And let me explain why that is. Here's a picture I will try to walk through. So they start out as eggs. The adult tick lays a massive amount of eggs. These eggs will turn into larvae that will then, they will feed on a bird or a mouse. They like the white-footed mouse, the white-footed mouse. This is the bad actor, is the white-footed mouse. And I'll get back to why this is the bad actor. After the larva has fed on the mouse and becomes, they digest, they will become a nymph. If this mouse was infected with Lyme disease or any of the other diseases, the mouse is infected, the larva starts out innocent and healthy. The larva will pick up the disease from the white-footed mouse. So this actually is a reservoir of disease here. The larva gets sick here, gets infected here, then turns into a nymph. The nymph will then seek out any of these critters, deer, what they call mesomammals, anything middle, a cat, a dog, people. But the deer is the main one that they'll feed on. They will then, the nymph will then infect the deer or the people. And then after the nymph has bitten the deer, then they turn into an adult. And then, as an adult, they will then go back to the same, and either people, deer, or these small mammals. Again, once they're infected, they will infect all of their other hosts along the way, or people. So people can get infected by nymph, or people can get infected by the adult. But now, the deer, when the adults, they require the deer is when they actually meet, the adults will meet their other, there's like a big party going on the deer, and that's where they mate. And so that's a big, that's the deer is critical for the life cycle of the tick, the deer tick, but it's not the reservoir for the disease. The reservoir for the disease is in the little white-footed mouse. Okay? So these other animals, like birds can pick, birds can be, they can help to sustain. They're part of, they can be part of the life cycle, but for some reason they don't tend to get diseased, they don't tend to carry the disease and pass it on to the next cycle. The animals that are the most efficient at picking up and holding the disease and spreading it is the white-footed mouse. So this is the reservoir of disease, and the deer is important to sustain the deer tick. So that's why a lot of Target is thinking about the deer as being the bad guy, but the deer is really necessary, unfortunately. So that's, I hope that cleared up this incredibly confusing, it is confusing. Now, what's also important in that, let me see if I actually, see there's something mentioned of spring, summer, fall, winter. This is a 2-year cycle. So that lovely nymph that bit me is now an adult. So there's an adult somewhere that is really sick. That is, but these ticks, so it's whatever happened 1 year, those ticks are still around for the next year. Unless you had an incredibly cold winter. But there's a seasonal stuff. Now I just want to focus, I'm just going to focus on the seasonality of that. What that means is, and this is January, February, March, April, May, June. Well, we're somewhere around here now. This is when the nymphs peak, okay? Right around May and June. And this is when the larvae peak. The larva is not really a threat for us. The adults peak anytime between February, they peak in the early, sometime in the late winter and again in the fall. We have adults. Now, this is when most people get infected. And it's not because these adults are any healthier than the others, it's just that the adults are probably a little bit bigger, so you're more likely to see them. But the nymphs are, they're smaller and they're more discreet, so you can miss them. But the nymphs are out now, so you have to be very careful about them. Now, this is a scary picture. This is what happened. So this is also, you need to really understand the behavior of ticks. This is a little deer tick. And what they do is when they're looking for something, they stand on their back legs just like that, and they stand on the edge of a piece of grass. Preferably, they often find like at the perimeter of a forest or a driveway. They like that is it perimeter land? That's the right word. No, along the side of a path, and they'll basically just sit there, and they can sense you. They can sense carbon dioxide. They can sense heat. And I said they're smarter than us. They have a lot of sense. They can sense us. We can't even see them, but they can see us coming. So they sense our arrival. They can feel the vibration, the hint of the carbon dioxide, or a sudden rise in the temperature by body heat. They can sense that. So they're kind of lying in wait for us, and we have no idea they're there. But just remember, tips of grass on low-lying weeds. That's where they tend to sit. And you actually can go out and probably in a week or so if you want to go look at them. We actually picked a mushroom, and there was a lovely nymph just sitting right there. Yeah. Again, they are just. We have to outsmart these little guys. And then we can't feel them bite. They know where to hide, and we can't find them. And they don't come off very easily. So now remember, they need a damp, humid environment to survive. They do not tolerate dry areas. So if you're in an area where there's like a lot of rocks, or an area that's really dry, you don't have to be paranoid about ticks. If you're in an area where there's a lot of wooded area, wooded edges, leaf litter, low ground cover, be paranoid, okay? And they don't hop. They don't ever hop. So if they're sitting on that grass that's leaning over here, and you're walking by, if you see a lot of row grass, instead of walking right by and just step to the side and walk a few inches away. If you don't actually touch the grass, they can't leap onto it. So something as simple as when you're walking on a path, stay in the middle of the path. You can actually reduce your risk of exposure by probably 80–90% just by not brushing along the grass. They're usually picked up on the lower leg, and they tend to crawl up the body looking for a place to attach. So that means if you're thinking about putting some protection on, don't wear open shoes. Wear socks, and tuck your. I'm not dressed appropriate for this, but tuck your pants into your sock, and then you can get any of these spray things and just spray your shoe and your sock. Very simple. And that will actually, again, it's not 100% effective, but if all you're doing is walking in an area, you put a little spray on your shoes and socks and your lower pants, and then you've reduced your risk significantly. Takes 2 seconds. I keep one of these at the bottom of the stairs, so before we go out, we just spray the feet. Very simple. The ticks will attach to clothing and then walk upwards. Okay, so if you're out doing something like foraging for mushrooms where you're in the brush and you have a lot of contact, the other thing you can do is you can spray your entire wardrobe with permethrin. Have an outfit that's your outdoor outfit, or you can buy clothes that's already treated. And I'll show talk a little bit about that. The other thing people think about, going outdoors and doing all these outdoor stuff. Again, most people who get it are not. If you're outdoors all the time, again, you will get it if you don't take precautions. But you can get it in your backyard. You can get it. It's most cases are associated with activities around the house in the yard. So you've got to, you got to be. You don't have to be out in the deep woods to get it. So I want to talk about protection. Again, hiking smart, but just basically not, stepping aside from, when you can, avoid weeds. Dress for success. Talk about that real simple. Use the repellents effectively. It's real easy. Do a tick check afterwards. Remove any ticks you find correctly. And then protect your little, yard area that you have. There's a certain way you can upkeep it a little bit to reduce it. If you do all these things, you'll be fine. Dressing for success. This is not necessary. That actually is a very well-known doctor I work with. I won't mention his name. Then again, this is there are many brands that you can get. Ex Officio has this. They're called Bugs Away. You can get an L.O. Bean in their fishing department. They're basically just your regular pants. I was going to wear them except I got them dirty because we were out in the woods today. But they're just regular pants, but they're pre-treated with permethrin, and they're about the same price as any other trousers, and they last. Well, I think they say they last like 12 or 14 washings. And anyway, so that's a really nice, easy way to do that. I have pants. I have a shirt. I have a little pullover, and then I also have my socks that I spray with permethrin. People who heard the NPR broadcast about ticks the other day, they were talking about, well, one of the, you can either buy this stuff, it's like, $20, whatever, for a pair of pants or a shirt that's pre-treated, or you can treat your own. The problem with when you treat it yourself, it's very inexpensive, but this stuff is really nasty. I mean, it gets, you end up inhaling it. It's not. It's a little, unless you're really comfortable working with strong chemicals and know how to take precautions, you've got to be careful. So I actually do a little bit of. I mainly try to wear the clothes that are pre-treated just because it's easier. The other thing is wear light clothing when you're outdoors. Don't wear black. The reason is if you have white clothing, you can actually see something crawling up. That's the reason for light clothing. Wear white socks. The same reason. Just get a dedicated pair of white gym socks and tuck your clothes into it. You can see something. Tuck your shirt into your pants and then tuck your pants into your sock. Because again, if you get on the outside, especially if you're treated with permethrin or pre-treated, a tick that's going to attach to you, they're not going to like that, so they're going to drop off. If your clothes are not treated, if let's say a tick gets onto you somewhere, it will climb around a bit trying to find a way in. If you're tucked in, less likely to happen, but if you're tucked in and you've got treated clothes, that tick is going to drop off. It's going to be a very unhappy tick. And again, spray DEET. DEET is in the active ingredient in most of these things, in Ben's, in Off. This is also Ben's. So there's so many products that have DEET in it, and you can spray this on your pants. If you're a birder or you have like stuff that is what's the kind of material that DEET can damage some of the rubber casings or
neoprene,
the neoprene, yeah. So if you're doing stuff that has like specialized equipment on it, you want to be careful about spraying DEET on that because I think it will mess up your binoculars, parts of your equipment. But there is another brand called Natrapel. The active ingredient in this is Picardin. Picardin, and this will not actually damage your binoculars, or if you had something on the other day that I was concerned about damaging. Was it your boots? Neoprene boots, yeah. So anyway, this you can put on without worrying about damaging any specialized gear you may have. This is supposedly safer. It's basically it's a variant of pepper spray. It hasn't been tested long, but there's certainly it appears to be safer than DEET. But then actually DEET is actually pretty safe if you don't have the really high concentrations of it. You only need about 25-30% DEET. If you have like 80, if you have like really highly concentrated DEET, that's when you tend to get into more trouble. But if you're using the DEET to spray on the outside of your clothes, you're good. Spray on the outside of your socks. One thing you should not do is spray your skin and then put your clothes on over that. Not a good idea. Okay. If you have your clothes tucked in, just spray your clothes. You don't need, and then only anything that's exposed. I actually wear gloves when I'm doing stuff outdoors if I can, and I have some treated gloves. If I sound like I'm paranoid, I am. Okay, so again, use repellents on the clothes. Because Yeah, don't wear open-toed shoes or sandals, because they can get right on your feet and in between your toes and climb up. Ticks that are brought into the house can survive for a couple of days, depending on the humidity of your house. And don't think that just washing your clothes will get rid of them, because they can survive a warm or hot wash. If you have a dryer, you can put them in the dryer for like an hour, but it has to be really hot. It has to be in there for a long time. These ticks are pretty resilient. Tick repellents, I talked a little bit about that. Again, 20 to 30% is all you need for the DEET. And again, many brands. This is the Picardin is the second one. It gives you 4 to 8 hours effectiveness. Again, it hasn't been around as long. But there's really not any real reason to assume there's going to be some, just because the ingredients, it doesn't seem to be so risky. This oil of lemon, there's a lot of people talking about using natural oils, and I've seen real mixed reports in the scientific literature saying whether they work or whether they don't work. There's a lot of people who swear by them. Again, I'd be cautious about that. There's something, the oil eucalyptus may help a little bit, but if you're going to be doing that, have a backup plan. At least make sure you're going to be doing a good tick check afterwards. And also, don't try to avoid the repellents that's pre-combined with sunscreen. Do the two, don't get it too by, if you're worried about sun and bugs, get the two separate, because you're going to need to reapply the sunscreen more often than you will the others. So just treat them both the same. Tick checks thoroughly. So after you're back, so this is, I'd say, the easy. I'm going to give you sort of the routine that we've done. I think it works best here. After you've been out in an area where you could be exposed to ticks, the best thing you can do is shower right away. The ticks do not immediately attach. They'll wander around, often for several hours, until they find a good spot. Now, you might be unlucky. They may find a wonderful spot right away, but typically they wander around for a few hours, several hours. So if you take a shower right away when they're wandering around, they will be removed. Some people are talking about that lint roller stuff. Yeah, I mean, if they're wandering around, anything you can do to get them off, but again, it may not get all of them, but at least it will help if you get sooner. Now, if you're like a Maine guide or you're out on a camping trip, you're not going to be able to do that. But that's one thing you can do: shower immediately. Well, as soon as you get back in, and then while you're taking a shower, just do a quick tick check. Your body's not that big. You don't have that many warm, moist places where they could go. And so as you're washing your hair, your scalp is really not that big. You can actually just, do a little feel to see if there's anything there. So you can use your fingertips, inspect scalp around the ears, hairline and neck, arms, armpit. Back is a little problem. If you've got a partner that will help you. Torso, belly button. Don't forget the belly button. Entire groin area, front and back. Skin folds, again, warm, moist places. They like skin folds. Legs behind the knees, between the toes. They know how to get into places where you won't find them. Again, when you're shampooing, keep your fingers together when you massage your scalp, and that way you can actually, do a more systematic feel for them. They like hair. Tick removal. If you find a tick, that's the other key thing. If you found a tick, this is an opportunity to get it off quickly. It's also a great way, if you want to infect yourself and ensure that you now have inserted all of that disease into your body. If you actually use a tweezers and squeeze, you will actually push all of that in. So you want to be really careful about how you remove that tick. Okay, especially if you've got like 24 to 48 hours, possibly even 3 days. You can ruin that completely. So don't ever squeeze, crush, or puncture the body of that. You want to pull straight up, get underneath, and pull up. Now this is actually much harder than it sounds. Don't twist and don't jerk. Okay, just go slowly. Try to get there. Tick spoons, and I forgot to bring one, but I have a picture of one. Tick spoons. You put it underneath the tick, and then you sort of gradually pull up on it. But don't get impatient and squeeze, because you're just pushing, you're forcing pressure, you're pushing all the disease into your body if you squeeze. Okay? So if you're going to use tweezers, make sure you got little ones and try to get underneath, and pull up. Okay? And go slowly. And this is hard, because I tell you, when you got an engorged tick on you, especially if you got an engorged tick on your kid or somebody, people panic, kids scream, and I'm saying this from personal experience. It is, the kids freak out when they find this tick on them. It's like, get it off. So, it's really hard, but you've really got to, and if you feel like you can't, go in somewhere, emergency care or someone, have somebody get that out, because you really don't want to squeeze that. Here's a tick spoon. I actually carry when we go camping, we go out, I always have a tick spoon with me. It's just it's like a spoon with a little notch in it, and then when the tick's there, you scoop under it so that it's right in that crease, and then you can gradually pick it up and pull it up. Okay. Now, if you find a tick and it's been engorged, and so now that one we just saw was not engorged. That was a nice little thin, flat tick. You can find a tick and it looks a little, we saw pictures of them engorged. You can actually take you can take an antibiotic for a short period of time, and that actually is pretty effective at preventing getting Lyme disease. So again, you want to talk to your doctor about that. But you can actually you can actually be, if the tick was attached, you've got a biggish tick. If you start the prophylaxis, if you start the medication within a few days of tick removal, you've got a pretty good chance of this of preventing getting Lyme disease. So basically, if you have a tick, talk to your doctor. Okay, because if you take a couple of days of this, it's a nice way, and it sure would be getting Lyme disease. There's no vaccine. I've heard various histories. There were histories of why there's no disease. No vaccine. There was a Lyme vaccine, and they withdrew the product in 2002, citing insufficient demand. I think there's a more interesting story behind this. But I'm not going to talk about that.
Corporate greed.
Yeah. Do you know what? Yeah. Well, I think there's actually some. I think maybe even perhaps a little more blame to go around than that. It's an interesting story that was told to me. So anyway, this is spraying your clothes with permethrin. What I do is I spray the sneakers wear outside, or my biking shoes and shirts, and just lay them out and spray. That's me spraying. This is this lovely squirter, but you got to be. This stuff is so nasty. I did some spraying a couple days ago, and I must have inhaled some of it, and I did not feel good. So wear a mask and try to avoid. And it really sprays. Okay, so a lot of people talk about chickens and guinea fowl, other ways of controlling it. Have you heard about chickens? Chickens and turkeys. Yeah, they eat ticks. Yeah. There's a lot of controversy about whether they help or not, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I have to show some data. Pesticides. A lot of people think they're just going to spray their yard and that will help. I'm personally vehemently against this for a variety of reasons, because they will kill the ticks, but they also will kill everything else. They'll kill the pollinators. They'll kill the same thing. You kill a tick, you're killing everything else. And I just don't see how that's going to be a good solution. If you're spraying your little yard and somebody else is spraying your, you still got the deers are moving. So I just don't see this as being a rational approach, and I don't see it as help. I mean, you're not going to be able to keep yourself within the confines of your little yard that you spray. Now, some people, again, there's some talk about using a botanical pesticide, the rosemary oil, and they say that that's actually pretty effective. So if you want to try the rosemary oil, go for it. And that's the recipe for it. A little bit of rosemary essential oil, and you shake it up, and you can go online, you can find a bunch of ways of making this. You can actually, I think, soak some rosemary oil.
We get our ticks on Cuttyhunk Island, which was one of the original places, but luckily the mothers of Lyme were more proactive.
Oh,
Otherwise, you might be calling it Cuttyhunk disease. And for several years, they gave all the homeowners cardboard tubes of
permetrin soaked cotton balls.
Yes, called
Yes,
Arachnids.
Environmental, so I want to talk, there's a bunch of environmental approaches for dealing with that.
That
The
was for the mice.
permetrin, I think it's actually, doesn't really bother dogs so much. I think it's pretty toxic for cats. And I don't know what other animals. So there is a solution. Can we remember the little white-footed mouse is the disease. And so the idea is that if you have cotton balls, that the white-footed mouse, you put them in places like wood piles or places where white-footed mice would hang out, and you put them in a tube, and then the mouse would go in there, pull the cotton out, bring it to its nest, and so then basically you're now protecting you're killing the ticks around the mice, so you're helping that. So that has been shown to be pretty effective, and there's some company that sells those. Actually, we were thinking of trying to make them. You just got to be careful about anytime you have anything soaked in permetrin, because it's going to kill your felines. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that it's going to do other animals may not like it. So you just want to make sure that cotton batting doesn't get into we like our cats.
Is permetrin the African daisy ground up, or is that some? That's chrysanthemums.
This is permethrin. I don't think there's anything natural about this thing, but I don't know. This is really toxic. You do not apply this to your skin. Do not inhale it. This is.
Cats lick themselves, probably it's so toxic to them.
Yeah, and I don't know. Dogs do that too. I don't know if there's just something. There's a great reference I'll talk to you I have later about. I think it's Cornell. Cornell has a wonderful piece they have on animals, how to protect your animals from it, and talks about that. So I can give you that reference. I can't say I know enough about that. I just know that permetrin hurts cats. Landscaping is another thing you can do. Apparently, the deer, these are a big problem because the deer love these ornamental shrubs like Japanese barberry. They like to eat these things. And so when the deer are there, the ticks will drop off of the deer. That's where you'll find them. Again, most ticks on lawns are in the transition area between the lawn and the woods, so beware. If you mow, you keep your grass low. That will help. If you increase light and reduce dampness by raking leaves, they love leaf piles. Again, if you can put mulch along that barrier area, that will help. The dry barrier makes it hard for the ticks to migrate. They really will avoid dry areas. So all you need is a thin area of dryness. So that's much safer than spraying. And beware the stone walls, because stone walls are lovely, but they shelter the mice, and the mice carry the ticks. So, so basically, when you're working outside and doing some of this stuff, gear up and then go deal with your leaf piles or other things. But you can do a lot of stuff in your yard to help. So somebody sells a deer repellent dog fast. I don't want to comment on that. But there are vaccines. We have a lot of friends who are like serious dog people, and this is a big deal for dogs. It's really a big deal. They often get Lyme titers on a regular basis. I think the symptoms in dog are, some of it makes them a little lame or a little loss of energy. I think it's a little more subtle. Again, there's a great reference I can give you to learn more about that. So apparently, again, the gorge ticks dropping off a pet will not survive or lay eggs in the house. Okay, so you don't really have to worry about the dog.
Zoo had babies one year.
You have that?
Climbing up all years ago.
Man, yeah. Well, theoretically, yeah. Now I don't know if those are deer ticks or not. Most, there are dog ticks, and dog ticks are not disease, but again, I can't tell the difference. Okay, this is the community, tick management in the community. The bait boxes, that's what you were talking about, the bait boxes. And so the bait doesn't harm the rodents, but it can reduce the tick population. They're commercially available, so you can get those, and those are actually pretty good, but you have to, get them. I'm sorry, that's the permetrin treated cotton balls. there's another one, a 4-poster feeding station. This is a cool concept. Where it's a funny, like it's an area where the deer feeds. There's something on the side, so when it puts its head in, its head is rubbing against this, and so you're basically treating the deer with a tick repellent. You know, it's like that stuff you put on your animal, but you're putting on the deer. And so I guess that's been found to be reasonably effective, but you have to put them in different areas. And I don't know that anybody in Maine is doing it. There's like one company that has a.
It says it's not approved in Maine.
Yeah, there's a company that, without special permitting from the Department of Inland Fisheries, there's one, yeah. So I don't know that anybody is in the process of it, but this is not something you do in your backyard, because you need to have a certain density of them, they need to be placed properly. It's a big deal. It looks like it works reasonably well. This is a guinea fowl. This is the other rage of guinea fowls are supposed to be the best tick eaters around.
If you don't mind giving you a little 5 in the morning, being short.
Yeah. So I guess the reason why they might be better than chickens or wild turkeys might be is they have more distance, but they're very good at eating ticks apparently. If you look at the scientific literature, which I did. There are places where they've had guinea fowls in certain houses and not guinea fowls in other houses, and they compared how many places had ticks in the interior. This is in the interior of their yard, the middle of their yard. This is the periphery of their yard, and this is at the forest edge of their area. And this is, the dark is with the guinea fowl, and the white are houses that did not have guinea fowl. And it looks like in the interior, the rate is really low, not much difference going on here. Around the periphery, again, pretty low number of ticks here. In the forest edge, it looks like there were a lot more ticks in the places that did not have guinea fowl. So it looks like so the guinea fowl looked like they were cutting, it looks like the guinea fowl lowered the rate. However, statistically, it was not statistically significant. So it means there wasn't a big enough to say it could have been due to chance. Okay? And then here, so that was adult ticks. That was looking at adult ticks. Okay? Now remember, nymphs are the devils here, because those are the ones we can't see. And so they looked at what's happening with the nymphs in the people who have guinea fowl versus not. And again, it looks like for the forest edge, the places that had guinea fowl had much lower number of nymphs. At the periphery, they had a lot lower nymphs, and even in the interior, they had a lot lower nymphs. So that looked pretty compelling. It's a trend, but this also was not statistically significant. So. It looks consistent, I mean, in my mind, for think about like causality. You never know if it's causal, something, observation, or this kind of study. But it sure looks promising. Promising trend. We actually tried that. We got some guinea fowl, but we learned that order really matters. This is Bob picking up some really cute guinea fowl. They're cute, and this is them in the backyard. People say that guinea fowl are really stupid. Okay, I just want to say, everybody you say who has guinea fowl said they're really stupid.
No, they're not.
Well, I like that. I like that.
No, they're not.
I agree.
We had one named General.
I love it.
And he came in the house and perched on a chair and talked to you.
I love it.
And the ladies would leave in the morning and
Yeah.
pull their skirts up and run out and have a committee meeting. They're the most amazing birds
Oh, I love that.
ever.
Everybody else is saying they're
wonderful.
stupid because the reason I love that is because I got outsmarted by these guinea fowl. Like not once, they got out. They figured out how to open the cage when I went in to answer a call. So here they are before in the cage. My daughter called. I went in and talking to her on the phone, and I look outside and I see one of the neighborhood feral cats, and I look. And can you see the guinea fowl in this picture?
Yes.
Yeah, right up here. This is one of them. They're lovely. They all escaped. We got there's another one down here. Yeah. We chased the cats away.
They're great alarms.
Yeah.
If somebody comes on your property,
Yeah.
they will let you know. They're really, if you
Yeah.
live in the deep woods and
Yeah.
Great to have.
Yeah. Well, so what we normally say order matters is that we didn't have a good place to put them. And I wasn't clear on how to really lock that door. Anyways, our neighbor came in, helped us catch the guinea fowl. We caught several of them, put them back in the cage, and then as I was actually sitting there watching them, one of them pecked his way out again. I know. We have a lot of feral cats where we are, so the cats actually can control some of the small rodents. So we actually feel really good about supporting our local feral colony in Georgetown, which we're quite a few. So in conclusion, I wanted to just again put this in perspective. We have no grizzlies, we have no rattlesnakes, we have no alligators, we have no mountain lions. We have nothing.
I'm not sure about the last one.
No, I'm pretty sure we were talking to somebody about that, and they said actually none of them were. Who was that woman we saw? They said that they're reporting.
There was a transient mountain lion.
There are
no.
Yeah, we met somebody who was actually like that was her job, studying these things. So actually, when looking, maybe we have that. We don't have a lot of them, no. But we have deer ticks, and they're out. Actually, deer ticks are out almost the entire year. The only time they're not out is when it's under like 37 degrees. Okay, so unless it's a deep, really cold, we have deer ticks year round. Most deer ticks are infected with more than one serious disease. Problem is getting worse. Global warming. We're in the epicenter of the problem right here. If you don't take precautions, you will get infected. Strategies to prevent infection are really effective and they're really easy. It takes once you get a couple of these, put them in the right place, it's not hard. This is really not hard. If you can put sunscreen on your face, you can do this. And do a tick check after you're exposed. Put a little bit of DEET in the right places, and you're golden. Remove ticks carefully if you find them. If it's engorged, seek care. Okay, seek care right away. Don't wait. Seek care right away. And if you have tick exposure and you have flu-like symptoms or a rash, just call your doctor. They can help you sort it out. Don't look online. Call your doctor. And treatment is most effective when you start early. I didn't mention that. I started my own treatment the day after, and then before I saw my doctor, and I was still pretty sick. But I was able to just take pills. I talked to several people I know who have way too many advanced degrees in health-related fields, who waited a little bit too long, ended up in the hospital, IV antibiotics. If you wait too long, it's treatable, but the earlier you get it treated, you can take pills. If you wait longer, you have to get intravenous antibiotics, means you have to be in the hospital. It just get treatment early. And doctors now, I think, are much more aware, but you still may have to help talk to your doctor. Make sure when you talk to your doctor, you talked about where you live, that you live in an area that's a lot of ticks out there. Talk about your exposure.
There are a lot of people in the room I know who have had history of undiagnosed Lyme disease, which is one of the reasons we're so happy to have you here. And I want to thank you.
Add to the confusion.